Hi there, Pancakes! In this video, we're going to tell you why pirates really needed an eye patch. We'll shed light on the hygiene situation on board ships in reality and share many other interesting facts about pirates. And at the end, we'll delve into the real pirate code. Very often we encounter many stereotypes associated with pirates, often stemming from movies and literature where they don't show us the real life of a pirate. The everyday life of a real pirate was vastly different from what's portrayed in movies. While raiding, robbery and other elements of pirate life certainly existed in reality, they were quite rare. The daily life of a pirate was first and foremost extremely challenging and hard work on board a ship. Let's start with what surrounded a pirate. First and foremost, it was the boundless sea or ocean, followed by the ship itself. A pirate ship was not very large, primarily because of the need for speed. As you can imagine, the larger the ship, the slower it moves. Therefore, pirates typically sailed on small, fast and maneuverable ships that could easily pursue or escape from their targets. Due to the small size of the ship, life on board was no less complicated than on larger vessels. There were many aspects that made life difficult for pirates, one of which was the smell. Yes, you heard it right, the smell. Most of the time, these ships had an awful stench of rotting fish and sweat. During that era, there were no showers as we know them, and fresh water was too precious to be used for bathing. Washing with salty seawater was practically impossible. This is what caused the horrible odor of sweaty pirates. While this smell might have been somewhat bearable on an open deck, it was maddening below deck, in the cramped quarters. However, the smell was just one of the challenges. Earlier we talked about the work on the ship. What did it actually entail? A pirate is a robber and a thief, but primarily, and sometimes exclusively, they are sailors. A sailor's work was extremely difficult and often dangerous. They worked in shifts, changing every 4 hours. Time was measured by glasses, which were hourglasses that measured 30 minutes each. 8 glasses passed before the next shift, and the pirate knew it was time for their shift to start, regardless of the time of day, weather, or how they were feeling. Often pirate sailors were engaged in complex and routine tasks. Some worked with the sails high up on the mast, which often led to injuries and fatalities. Others were responsible for cleaning the deck or other shipboard tasks. And this routine repeated every 4 hours for months and in some cases even years. Let's not forget about diseases, which also made a pirate's life extremely challenging. For example, scurvy, caused by a sudden lack of vitamin C, had various consequences, including rapid fatigue, tooth loss, joint pain, and ultimately death. This constantly haunted pirates and made their everyday life very dangerous. That's roughly what a pirate's life on a ship looked like. So we've covered the everyday life of a pirate, and it's safe to say it was very challenging and dangerous. But was there anything that could bring joy to a pirate? Yes, it was food, although even that was quite meager. As you know, during that time there were no canned foods or refrigerators, which severely limited the types of food that could be taken on board a ship. Fresh foods like vegetables, fruits and raw meat were in short supply, and they were typically consumed within the first few days due to the inability to store such items for an extended period. The lack of access to fresh produce was one of the reasons for the previously mentioned scurvy. Most of the provisions were long-lasting foods, either smoked or salted. Large quantities of salted food were taken on board, and bread was replaced with hardtack, a type of biscuit that had a longer shelf life. However, hardtack had its downsides too. It often attracted insects. Nevertheless, it was consumed because there were no alternatives. Many historians also claim that when pirates loaded their ships before setting sail, they filled the holds with livestock, primarily cows and goats. In some cases, they even brought chickens on board. This was a clever move because pirates used chickens to produce eggs. When their main food supplies were running low or spoiling, pirates would slaughter the animals to obtain fresh meat. Pirates drank water, and they took it in large quantities. However, water had a tendency to spoil. In the constant heat and with limited means of preserving it, water quickly became undrinkable. To combat this, pirates diluted it with rum to mask the taste and disinfect it. Rum was a fairly accessible drink on board, but there's a stereotype that pirates were perpetually drunk and always drinking rum. In reality, they did drink rum, but it was consumed in regulated quantities to prevent drunken riots. Occasionally, as a reward, pirates were allowed to drink more than their usual ration, but this was not very common to avoid the aforementioned riots and disturbances. Despite having stocked up on food, there were still cases when supplies ran out. In such situations, pirates had limited options. They could either go fishing, which they did rarely since it was a time-consuming task and not everyone had the patience for it, or they could resort to a more extreme option – cannibalism. When pirates truly ran out of food and had no access to land, they might carefully consider one of their comrades. For example, in some extreme situations, maimed or wounded pirates often became the first to be chosen for the common pirate pot. We don't mean to say that all pirates were cannibals, but such cases were not uncommon in pirate practice. From all of this, we can conclude that the pirate diet was very meager and devoid of luxury. We've talked about the everyday life of a pirate and their rations, so now let's delve into what a real pirate looked like. Movies often depict pirates as individuals with a hook for a hand and a black eye patch, possibly missing a leg, and of course a parrot on their shoulder. While the lack of limbs among pirates did exist, mainly due to injuries sustained in battle or accidents, the famous pirate look has absolutely no historical basis and has nothing to do with reality. However, the famous black eye patch did exist, but it served an entirely different purpose. It wasn't meant to conceal the absence of an eye, since a person without an eye would hardly elicit any particular reaction from others in terms of physical impairments. The eye patch was a practical tool. You see, when transitioning abruptly from a well-lit area to a dark one, it takes time for the eyes to adjust to the darkness. There's a theory that pirates covered one eye in advance with a dark patch to block bright light, so when a pirate needed to enter a dark place, like the ship's hold during battle, they could simply remove the eye patch to have one eye already adapted to low light conditions. It's hard to imagine a pirate without a parrot on their shoulder. But this is also a myth, inspired by authors of pirate novels who drew from the trends of the 16th and 17th centuries. During that time, there was a demand for exotic animals, brought back by sailors from distant voyages. Owning such an exotic pet was a fashion statement of the era. While a pirate with a parrot on their shoulder might have existed, there are no documented historical records to confirm this. In general, a pirate's appearance didn't significantly differ from that of an ordinary civilian sailor of the time. They usually wore simple and inexpensive clothing, often in light shades. Light-colored clothing attracted less heat, which helped them endure the hot maritime climate. Now let's talk about how pirates made a living. For example, everyone is familiar with the novel Treasure Island, where the main theme is the search for treasure. However, all of this is highly romanticized, and in reality, the average pirate hardly ever thought about finding hidden treasures. Pirates earned very little, despite all the hardships and expenses of their profession. Their income typically came from ordinary robbery and raids. They targeted small trading ships that couldn't put up much resistance. The loot from such small trading vessels was rarely substantial, barely enough to cover their expenses, and all the profits were divided equally among all crew members. For instance, the captain of the ship received the same share as an ordinary sailor or cook. However, there was a more profitable form of piracy known as privateering. In simple terms, it was a legal license to engage in piracy, officially granted with the seal of approval from the country to which the pirate belonged. Privateering existed in nearly all countries with access to the sea or ocean, including England, Spain, and even Russia. For example, one of these privateers was the famous pirate Francis Drake, who was granted a privateering license, allowing him to plunder enemy ships more profitably on behalf of the English crown. This was how the majority of pirates made their living. Some barely scraped by with occasional and not very lucrative robberies, while others engaged in more successful privateering. But hardly anyone struck it rich, and whatever little they managed to earn was typically spent almost instantly on the very first shore, often on women and alcohol. Knowing how pirates made a living, we may involuntarily wonder how long on average a pirate lived. During that era, piracy was typically punished with gallows or other forms of execution, and if a pirate fell into captivity, their fate was hardly enviable. However, we can consider the previously mentioned practice of privateering, which could exclude a pirate from the list of potential gallows candidates. Still, it didn't exclude many other risks, such as scurvy, death in battle, or other unfortunate accidents. Based on all this, historical experts conclude that the average lifespan of a pirate during that time ranged from 2 to 3 years. If a pirate managed to survive in their profession for 5 years, they were considered extremely experienced and respected. This leads us to understand that the life of a pirate was exceedingly short. For comparison, the life expectancy of a slave on a plantation during the same era was 10 years or more, even considering the harsh conditions, physical punishments, and meager diet. We've covered many aspects of a pirate's life, but what about the pirate code? We often picture pirates as fearless outlaws who exist outside of rules and laws, but that's not true, or at least not entirely true. In reality, pirates didn't follow many of the norms and laws established by various states, but they lived by their own laws, known as the Pirate Code. It may sound strange, but piracy could hardly exist without laws. The Pirate Code was drawn up individually before setting sail each time, with something new added or something old removed. Every pirate had to sign and strictly abide by it. After reviewing the code, it becomes clear that all the rules were subservient to one overarching principle. The pirate ship had to function as efficiently as possible. This meant that nothing should distract the pirates from their arduous physical labor out in the fresh sea air. For example, bringing a woman on board was punishable by death, because according to the superstitions of the time, having a woman on board was believed to bring bad luck. Pirates, like many sailors of their era, were quite superstitious. Desertion was also punishable by death, as it was seen as an act of betrayal. Punishments for other offenses included being marooned on a deserted island without any provisions, for attempting to hide or steal part of the loot or cheat their fellow crew members in any way. Physical punishments were also meted out. For instance, smoking or firing a weapon near the powder magazine, where gunpowder was stored, could result in a flogging of 5 to 15 lashes. Fighting or gambling for money on board was strictly forbidden, as it could lead to mass brawls. And of course, everyone had to obey the captain unquestioningly, with punishments ranging from floggings to execution for insubordination. The key was listen to the captain, and on land, do as you pleased. By the way, pirates even had their own real pirate capital, called Port Royal, where almost all Caribbean pirates would converge. It was located on what is now modern-day Jamaica. There, in the port's taverns and brothels, weary seafarers could spend their ill-gotten gold and obtain all the things that were forbidden on the ship. These were the stern but just laws that every pirate without exception had to adhere to, because without the strict observance of these rules, piracy could not exist. Like any other human society, it needed order and structure to function. Thank you for watching.